And so for me to be successful, I need to be constantly evolving, or at minimum being willing to evolve and adapt, so that as the landscape shifts, I can change with it and don't become extinct.
Gotta do that. I gotta get the jimmies out, you know?
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Answering Legal Everything Except the Law podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick Worker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Our guest today serves as a shareholder and attorney at a civil defense litigation practice in Alabama. He also has a new book, which is called Level Up Your Law Practice, that we're very excited to talk to him about. Jeremy Richter, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate having you here. So I want to start off. I just want you to kind of introduce yourself, introduce your new book, tell us, how you got to where you are and why you wrote the book.
Okay. So like you said, I'm a civil defense lawyer in Birmingham, and this is where I have done the entirety of my practice. Actually, when I graduated in 2012, I had no job prospects. We were in the middle of a recession. So I took the bar exam and then, watched my wife go to work every day while I sent out resumes and cover letters, and nothing happened, just crickets. And then some of the folks that I had clerked for who weren't able to hire me had somebody reach out to them about, do you know anybody? We need a young associate. They recommended me. And then I've been at the same firm for the last 8 years, trying a lot of car wrecks and truck wrecks and whatever else comes along the way. And there's plenty of other stuff. So that's what I've done. In 2016, I started a law blog as a way to help market myself and my firm, because I realized at that point, 4 years in, you kind of start looking at a bigger picture of, I can't just be doing other people's work the rest of my practice. I need to find some of my own clients, and insurance defense is really competitive. I know all law practice areas are, but it is. So I try to figure out, how can I distinguish myself from my competitors and my peers. And so I started a law blog where I wrote about, early on, it was writing about appellate cases and things that affected our clients. And it expanded from there to writing about law practice management and client management, relationships, that sort of thing. And then that transitioned to a couple of books. My third book is the one you mentioned that came out earlier this year, which I launched in the middle of a pandemic, which isn't awesome for book sales, but whatever, things happen. If we've learned anything in 2020, it's like things happen.
Yep.
And so most of that book, or maybe 40% of the new book, is about mindset and being able to adjust and prepare ourselves and find out what we want from our practices and put ourselves in a place to be successful and just deal with the things that come across our desk every day and interfere with our work and that sort of thing. So, and I'm not writing it from a perspective of, hey, I've got all this stuff figured out and you should listen to me. It's like, hey, here's the fires that I've been in and some of the things that I've learned along the way, and come alongside me and let's kind of figure this out. And maybe I can make this journey a little bit easier for you from either my successes or my screw ups sometimes.
I love that perspective. And I got to say, and this is going to sound like a fake story, and I'm sure everybody probably thinks I'm so full of crap, man. But it's whatever. I don't care. I still sleep. I sleep okay. I don't sleep that great. So I think a couple of years ago, before I started running the marketing department here, I was the creative kind of design guy, not design artistic, but I would come up with concepts for stuff. And one of the concepts I came up with for an ad that I wanted to do for specifically my service was, I wanted to make it like a little, kind of like an old school Mario, and he's jumping up and he's going to hit the mushroom, but the mushroom is like the Answering Legal logo with the scales and everything. And the Mario is wearing a suit and tie, like a navy blue suit and tie. And the ad was going to say, level up your law firm. So when I saw that your book title was Level Up Your Law Practice, I'm like, wow, that is so awesome. I thought of that too. I don't want to steal your thunder or anything, like not like that in that sense, but I was like, oh, that's such a cool name for a book. And I wish I had done it. I didn't, but you know what I mean?
And then Mario is on the cover, or someone who looks very much like Mario, but may not be Mario,
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
case
yeah, yeah.
anybody from
It's
Nintendo is
not
listening.
Mario, but you know, like if it draws on some sort of
Yeah,
resemblance,
it might evoke some childhood memories for
yeah,
you.
I got say no more. Um, so you're talking about mindset, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the book is sort of about. So in your opinion, how much does an attorney's mindset play a role in the success or failure of their practice?
I mean, I think it's really big. And now I think there are some people who don't have a ton of self-awareness and are going to be successful, and that's just, like the way things go. But for me to be successful on my own terms and know what works for me and is sustainable over the long haul, that's taken a lot of reading and a lot of self-assessment and just like figuring out who I am and how to play to my own strengths within my law practice. And I had the lawyer that I was hired to work for primarily. He was he was an outgoing, gregarious guy and loved going to conferences and interacting with people. And he would take me with him. And like, he was just really good at that personable in-person side of marketing. And it was really magnetic and people were drawn to him. And I'm not that person. And that kind of marketing isn't sustainable for me. Like, I can do it in the short term. I can go to conferences and I can, you know, rub elbows with people, although I'm really terrible at small talk. But it drains me and I don't get energized by it. It wears me out. And so I had to find what works for me. And so I think a part of that is mindset. But there are certainly other aspects to mindset of, being able to accept feedback or criticism, understanding what your fears are and how to manage those. And I think all of that and understanding what you want your vision for your law practice to be. So all of that kind of plays in together, that if you're willing to put in the work to figure out what works for you, then you're less likely to experience burnout. You're less likely to find yourself 10, 15, 20 years into a career or a job that like you just dread waking up every day because it means you have to do this thing one more time. And so, that's like, there's going to be hard days. There's going to be hard weeks and months and years. But when you're putting in the internal work, then it makes those things more manageable. And so that's kind of what I wanted to communicate and how I see those things.
I went to a few different colleges, universities, but I ended up one of my last stints was at Stony Brook University, and I had this professor who taught, it was like advanced statistics, but it wasn't business statistics. It was like, I don't know, some crazy. I'm not a math guy, but I had to take it, right? And one of the things that he did really well was he was like a really good motivator, talker, helped really people figure out what they wanted to do. And I don't remember why. He was just a statistics professor, and I wish I could thank this guy, because I still think about this. What he said to the class was, you know, you're gonna go out into the world and you're gonna see a lot of people start their own businesses and find success. And a lot of these people who aren't self-aware are going to find success on accident, and that's going to self-validate them, right? And self-validate their choices, and so they think that they can do it again, and they think they can do it again. And he in essence taught us that, like, success isn't a validator of the choices that you made, and being self-aware, like you're talking about, and knowing your strengths and weaknesses is something that you can sort of play to and replicate, right? So like, it might not be sustainable for you to, I'll give my interpretation of it is that you can go to a marketing conference, and I'm talking to you right now. You seem like a great talker, and you can rub elbows with somebody and get a lot of, contacts and leads and experience short-term success just from going to one marketing conference, but it drains you, and that's not what you're good at, and that's not what you're comfortable doing. And so if you try to replicate that a bunch of times, you'll either experience the burnout that we're talking about, or it won't work so well, maybe the third or the fourth or the fifth time. And then where are you? Like, this is all this is what you've invested in, and then you experience failure. So what I'm hearing is self-awareness and knowing what you're good at, knowing what you love to do, is ultimately more important than like finding this short-term success, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's so much wisdom in what he taught and then what you obviously took away from it. And then one of the things that I write about and that's important too, and I think it draws into what you're saying here, is that we have to focus on the processes that either bring us to our success or failure rather than focusing on the outcome. And I'll give you a really specific example of that. Because I use a lot of sports examples in that part of the book, because you have this 76ers and you have Bill Belichick and you have Nick Saban, and all these guys talk about process. And so in my own trial experience, we had a case early in February of this year that tried, and it was a case that we probably shouldn't have won. My client rear-ended some folks, and like the big question in the case was whether or not the people were hurt or not. They were claiming to be hurt, but were they or weren't they? Because there was no dispute that like she ran into the back of their car. And so we try the case and we win, and we weren't expecting to win. And so, you talk to people about it the next few days, and everybody wants to know how it went. And, there's part of you that like really wants to accept this praise, like, look at this great job we did. But there's another part of me that knows that, a different jury on a different day gets a different result. And it wouldn't have been anything that I did. And so I couldn't really look at that positive outcome as a determiner, because it could just as easily have been a negative outcome. What I had to go back and look at and analyze was, okay, what did I do along the way? Did we do all of the right things to put ourselves in this position that ultimately led to a successful outcome? And even if it had been a negative outcome, did we still do the right things? And we just put it in the hands of 12 people and they get to decide. And so for me, I enjoyed the positive outcome. I enjoyed winning that. But it's more important to go back and look and say, okay, what did we do that got us here? Should we do those same things next time? What should we do differently or better? And so as much as you can in those few moments enjoy the result, you still have to go back and look at what got me here. And so whether it's marketing, whether it's the business aspect of your practice, if you had a really profitable year, was it happenstance, or was it things that you actually did intentionally to achieve those things, and are they replicable? What should you do better or different to maximize that? So focusing on those processes, to me, is more important than the outcome.
When you said the 76ers originally, I was like, oh, the 76ers. And then I was like, oh, he's talking about the process. He's talking about Joel Embiid.
That's right.
I want to put like a Joel Embiid, like whoever edits this, put a Joel Embiid right here in my tiny little hands, little bobblehead guy.
Yeah, and Ben Simmons right beside him, and then
yeah. Well,
we'll see from there.
We'll see if Joel is still in the Philadelphia next year.
Yeah.
I love sports, so I love the sports references. I don't love Bill Belichick, but that's okay. Not a lot of people do. I respect him, but
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, winningest or technically best head coach we've seen maybe ever. Gotta show him some love, but not in a heartfelt way.
But you don't have to like him.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Not a likable guy. Sorry, Bill. When you're watching this, I'm sorry about that. So I know we're talking about processes, and I know that, especially in my experience, I've seen a lot of firms out there, and we tend to see this is they go out, they start their firm, and they experience like a short period of success, but ultimately it's not really sustainable, like we've been talking about. So what are some of your keys to building these processes that can help firms stay more successful and more sustainable over time?
All right. So last September, I attended a conference where they talked about key performance indicators and using metrics to look at your profitability. And I am not a business guy, or haven't been historically, but it's something that I'm trying to improve on because it matters. Before I went to law school, I was a high school teacher. I studied history and education, no business experience ever. And so like all these ideas are new to me. So about 4 years ago, I started setting goals. And initially it was just setting goals within my law practice of, whether it's adding a new client or billing a certain amount in a year, or like whatever it happens to be. And so the fourth quarter of every year, I start to think about, what do I want my goals to be for the next year? And then last year, when I learned about this idea of key performance indicators and statistics that you can use to look at profitability, what areas of your practice are more profitable than others, then I started applying that to my goals so that very tangibly I can monitor, like, you have these goals and you're trying to achieve it by the end of the year, and you have maybe certain milestones that help you indicate that. But this let me implement metrics and things that would, and I put examples of it in the book that are really number heavy, and so it's kind of hard to go into here, but it let me monitor it throughout the year to see, okay, am I on pace? And I'll give you an example of one of the things I did. Is I realized that there was a certain aspect of my practice that not only was it not as profitable as other practice areas I had, but I was losing money by doing it. And so it was something that I had clients and I had people sending me business, but it was not good business. And the time that I was spending on that practice area was, not only was it not profitable, but it meant that I wasn't spending that time that I could have been used on more profitable aspects of the business. And so by looking at that and sitting down to, figure those things out, I realized I just got to get rid of this. This is losing me money. And so it can be really difficult, especially if you are in a billable hour practice like I am, to make the decision to sit down to look at and analyze the business side of the law practice. But it can be a hugely effective means of using your time so that you can figure out, do I have an area of my practice that is losing me money or is making me less money, and I could be spending that time better on something else that's making me more money? And I think there's a lot of lawyers out there who are not businessmen or women and don't have training in that and are just kind of winging it, looking at the bank account and, okay, there's money in the bank account. There's more than there was this time last year, so I must be doing fine. And that may be sustainable in the short term, but it likely means that you are not maximizing your profitability and you aren't putting procedures in place that are making your business the best that it can be.
I was just speaking to attorney Mike Morse. He's out of Michigan, and he wrote Fireproof. I forget the full name of the book. It's like Fireproof, a 5-step process to take your firm from something to wildly profitable. And one of the things that we talked about was a few years ago. He's like you. He has a bunch of KPIs that he looks at, key performance indicators. And he has he calls it the Jumbotron, another sports reference, right? And you look up at the Jumbotron and it tells you that, you've spent X amount on this case, right? Investment wise, then you've spent this much time on it. And this is how much you expect to make from it. And when you have all that set up, you can know, okay, this case takes me X amount of time. I can expect to invest this amount of money and I can expect to profit this much. And you can compare that to the other types of cases that you have in your firm. And in his case, he, like you, had this type of case where it was only 4% of the profit that his firm would make for the entire year. They took a lot of those cases, And the average length of time that they spent working on this case was more than double of all the other stuff that brought him the rest of the 96% of his profit.
Mm.
So what did he do is he started taking those cases and referring them out to other lawyers who needed work and could offer that time, or maybe had better processes and were better equipped to handle those cases. And then he would get a referral fee from those lawyers. So he was still bringing in money, cut out all of those hours that he was spending on those cases that weren't very profitable, and was able to take the rest of the time and invest it into the other cases.
Yeah, so he may have been netting more from it in the long run because he wasn't
Exactly.
having to invest any of his time in it. Yeah.
Exactly. And like for me, I don't, so like I have my day-to-day things that I do, and I know how much time it's going to take me to do one thing versus the other. But it's also like that old, like I see this on the internet sometimes, is this is why you should hire, a designer to do this for you, right? And it's like, oh, but you shouldn't, I'm getting this wrong. I'm going to get it right. This is why you shouldn't hire a designer and give them a really short deadline for a turnaround. You should let the designer tell you how long it's going to take and pay them accordingly. And it's, you get them, you say like, draw Spider-Man, right? And they time it. And it's like one of those like sped up GoPro type videos. And the designer will draw Spider-Man in 2 minutes. And it's like really sketchy, and, it doesn't look that good. And, it doesn't have the details, right? And then you give him 20 minutes to draw Spider-Man, and it comes out and Spider-Man's like swinging from a web, fighting the Green Goblin, shooting webs, and he's got full color on him, and the other one is just like a sketch. And so when you properly can understand your strengths and weaknesses, and you have processes, right, then you can get not only a better outcome, but you can spend more time getting the better outcome. I think that's what I'm taking from it. Maybe
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
wrong
I
there.
agree. And part of that too is figuring out what work do I need to do versus what do I need to delegate to somebody else? Like there may be some, like, so my billable practice, if it's billable and the client will pay me to do it, I probably need to be doing it. But there are a lot of things in my practice that aren't billable. There's a lot of administrative things that have to be handled that maybe there's a good bit of that I can hand off to somebody else that I've hired, that I trust, that they do a good job and that's why I hired them. And so I need to give that to them to do. Or there may be work that has to be done and it's billable, but it doesn't have to be done by me because it's not a high enough level work that it requires my time. And I can give that to an associate or a paralegal or whoever. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is having a mindset of not scarcity, um, but of openness. And now I'm totally drawing a blank on what the word is that I'm looking for. That's the opposite of scarcity, um, an
Something
abundance
like
mindset. Oof,
abundance. Nice.
struggling
Okay,
there.
there you
Yeah,
go. I was gonna say plentiful.
yeah. Is it well, same thing, but
Yeah, I was just trying to help. Sorry.
no, that was perfect. All right, so having an abundance mindset, and in the core of the idea is there's always more where that came from. And there's a lot of lawyers out there who don't want to hand out work to other people because they feel like, what if I don't get any more? And I need to hold this all close to my chest, and they're not willing to share their relationships with clients or their workloads or whatever. And so they're actually hurting themselves in the long run because they could be taking on more work and being more profitable by including other people in their processes. And so when you asked about what can law firms and lawyers be doing to be more successful in the long run, a part of that is hiring people that you trust and then giving them the work to do so that you give yourself more opportunity to focus on the business side of things and an opportunity to grow your practice beyond just sustainable for one person or two people, but to include lots of people and have some, law is really difficult to scale and it's not built that way. But you can do it if you do it intentionally and surround yourself with good people and trust them to do the work that you hire them to do.
I worked in sales when I first started here, and that was quite a few years ago. But I had I had a manager who worked here, and he no longer works here. And one of the things that I used to see him do that would drive me crazy, but it was because he was such a good salesman, but he was also a very, he didn't have an abundance mindset like you're talking about. He was kind of like a hoarder.
Mm.
And so in my opinion, a lot of these things that we're talking about are like team mindsets, right? And maybe you're the captain of the team, but you still have to pass the ball, you know? And this guy, he would get leads for like lawyers that either needed a service or were interested in using us, and he would never share, and he would hoard all these leads, and these people would get sick and tired of hearing from him, or maybe they didn't like him, or maybe he rubbed them the wrong way, and whatever have you. He never passed the ball, and he was of this mindset that eventually these leads are going to run out, and there's not going to be any more lawyers for him to talk to, and he's not going to be able to make any more commissions. And that ultimately led to his failure. And he no longer works here. I wish him the best. He was a good dude. But the truth of the matter is I've been here for like 5 years after that, and we're still going strong. And
Yeah. And that's what's hard for people who are really good at something, or perceive themselves to be really good at something, because I dare say that, and this probably not come as a surprise to you, there's a lot of lawyers that have really high opinions of themselves. You know, we have, and then we have a lot of education, and a lot of people have gone to like really fancy schools, and you know, there's just this the sense of self-importance about lawyers, and they're like, well, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to screw it up, because certainly they can't do it as well as I can. And maybe they can't initially. But if you're going to be successful in the long term, you've got to train them up to do it as well as you can. Hopefully they can do certain things better than you can. And you're all going to have a relationship where you have opposing strengths and weaknesses, and you're able to, you know, build camaraderie and a relationship that allows you to be successful beyond what you could have done by yourself, and have skills that you don't personally have, but the people around you have, that enable you to have a stronger practice and a stronger business. So yeah, it's hard to pass the ball sometimes, but you gotta trust that the people you've put in place can handle it.
I'm so struggling with this right now. And I'm directly under the VP who works here, and a lot of the stuff that I do, I have to let go of it. I have to start delegating it even more to my team. And it's not that I don't trust them, but it's like what you said. It's like I do this so well, right? And I don't want to pass because, you know, if I give them and this is the problem too, is I know that in the beginning it's not only is it scary, but you're kind of right in a sense. Like when you first pass the ball, the other person might not do as good of a job as you do. But that's where you come in and you teach and you educate and you help and you facilitate until this person gets to where they need to be. And that's the essence of running a business, right? Is if you want to grow and you want to scale, you have to enable the people around you. That's what being a manager is. That's what being a boss is. That's what being an owner is. Is really teaching up and coaching up the people around you in order to ultimately just help your own business grow. Like if the people around you aren't doing a good enough job, that kind of falls on you as like the manager and owner.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
and
struggling with
just
that, but
yeah, and just so we're clear that I'm preaching to the choir here, is like one of my parts of my job that I like is reviewing medical records. And so most of my cases are bodily injury, and whether it's a car accident or truck wreck or whatever, it's bodily injury stuff. And so there's usually a bunch of medical records. And I like going through those medical records, and it helps me evaluate the case. And when I create spreadsheets, because I'm really nerdy and I have a spreadsheet for everything, um, I do it in a very particular way that I've liked and I've developed over the course of 8 years, and it works for me. And so it is difficult for me, even though in many instances I can hand that off to an associate or a paralegal to handle. it is difficult for me to do that because I want it done in this very particular way. And I can justify doing it myself because it helps me evaluate the case and be more familiar with the case when it comes time for depositions or trial or whatever is down the road. So I can absolutely justify being the person who does it, but that doesn't mean that it's always the best use of my time. And that if somebody else does it even, 85% as well, it's still done. It still has all the information there. And I've been able to do a possibly higher level, higher functioning work. In replace of that, it's not like I'm sitting here doing nothing instead. And so I struggle with it because I enjoy that work. I can justify doing it, but there's a lot of instances where I would be best served by letting somebody else handle it.
And
So
I
it's
think
tough.
it's important to remember that experience a lot of the time is the best teacher. And so the more time that you let, in your example, in my example, the more time that you let other people handle the things that you might be good at, but they need to be doing, the more they're going to get really good at doing it too. And that's ultimately like you learned over 8 years, right? I've been here 6 or 7. I don't even remember anymore, but you just you got to pass the ball, man.
Yep,
Um,
I agree.
so I want to move on a little bit. So obviously we're talking about level up your law practice. It's pretty clear from the title and the cover of the book that video games were a big part of your life growing up. So were there any lessons that you learned from playing video games as a kid that you've sort of now implemented and that seem kind of relevant in your law career?
Can't throw a remote control at everything every time it doesn't go your way. Does that count? Um, the game isn't always cheating. I know that I said that a lot. No, I don't know. That's a really good question. And I don't know that I have an immediate answer. I would have to think about that one. But, a lot of it is just you go through these steps. So whether it's Mario Brothers, I think things are a little more advanced than that now. I'm teaching my kid to play Mario Kart. He's 5 years old, so we're trying to play Mario Kart on the Wii now,
Classic. Okay.
which is a struggle for him. I think the coordination isn't quite there yet. Um, but you have to go through, like we talked about the process earlier. Games are the same way of like whether you're building a character in a role-playing game, you just have to take every step as it comes and figure things out along the way. There's some information that's useful and you apply it. There's other information that you collect the information and then discard it because it doesn't matter. And then this is well, I kind of forgot where I was going there, but I don't think I have a really good answer for you there.
That's okay. I think where you kind of got me, and maybe I can help with this, is that a lot of things are practice, right? Practice makes perfect, and I don't think that the games get that much easier. In fact, they get more complicated. But as you sort of learn the controls, right, like the process, it sort of transfers to each individual thing. Like I'll play like a shooter game, but then I play Madden. I love sports, and that game makes me throw my controller at the wall. Uh, but everything
No, I
has.
think what you're saying is good, that your skills build on each other.
Yep.
And so, like, when I was a baby lawyer, I come in just out of law school and I didn't have very many skills. Like, I knew how to think like a lawyer because that's what law school teaches you, but I didn't know how to be a lawyer. And so, in the firm that I came into, what they needed was somebody who was willing to get thrown into the fire and figure things out. And fortunately, I'm a pretty internally motivated person, and that works for me. It wouldn't have worked for everybody. It worked for me in this particular instance, but I had to, learn how to do depositions and how to do written discovery and how to write briefs in a way that's effective. And so those were the skills that I started out with, is the base level skills to figure out how not to die every 5 minutes. And then as you figure that sort of stuff out, and it's a pretty steep learning curve, it takes a while, and I continue to try to improve on those things. Then, like, you know how to lawyer. And so then you start thinking about clients, and you start thinking about how to build a business. So I think what you said is really a good application here of, like, your skills build on each other. Things get progressively more difficult, but you get progressively more capable of dealing with it. And, eventually you're able to look at this thing from a 20,000 foot perspective and see, okay, I'm not looking at individual cases anymore, although I'm continuing to work individual cases. I'm looking at cases and managing those cases. I'm looking at how to manage my relationships with my clients, and I'm looking at how to manage my business. And so where you came into the game with this, like, all you're dealing with is cases and figuring out how to do it and not commit malpractice. Several years in, like, you are, the game has changed and it's gotten progressively difficult, but you've adapted and learned new skills and are figuring out how to manage it in a much more strategic manner rather than just dealing tactically with small issues one at a time.
I'm a big metaphor guy, so like all of this is really super helpful to me. And I want to build on what you're talking about with like the client relationship, right? So I know, and I speak to lawyers now, and especially it's so crazy. So I'll give a personal example. Is when I first joined this company, all anybody cared about, like if I would talk to them on the phone, I was in sales for a couple of years, and now I'm in marketing, and I still talk to people on like the inbound side. A lot of what people used to care about with like an answering service is sort of obsolete. So they used to care more about like, oh, well, I just care that a live person answers my phone. And I was like, okay, great. I got plenty of those. I can definitely answer your phone live. And then it became, well, like the consumer got more educated, and it became more of, well, I really care that you guys only answer for attorneys. So is that something that you do? Are you able to only answer for attorneys? And I would say, yep, I got that. And then it became, I really need you to ask these specific questions to my new clients. And I really need you to patch these new calls through to me. And then it became even more. And it's, I need you to integrate with my calendar. I need you to integrate with my CRM. I need a mobile app. I need to see in real time what's going on with my firm. I need all these KPIs. And, it's a struggle to keep up, and we're working on the business development side, but things change over time, and the game gets harder, but we still have the same core values and skills that we're able to bring over and apply that into the development of these new aspects of our business. So I want to talk about the lawyer and client relationship, right? And I know you've been doing this for a while. So how, in your experience, has the lawyer-client relationship changed? And is there anything that clients now expect from their attorney that they typically didn't in the past?
So I think it depends. I think the short answer is yes, it's definitely changed, but it also depends on who your clients are. So for me, most of my clients are big insurance companies. And so certainly within the last, and even before I was practicing, within the last 15 years, their ability to aggregate big data and look at what their lawyers all across the country are doing, and even compare lawyers that they use within the same state and say, okay, when I send a case to them, the cycle time for them to open and close a file is, 17 months versus what is the other firm doing? Or our defense costs when it goes to firm A are higher or lower than when we send it to firm B. And so we also have to be aware internally of what our own data is and monitor it, where 15 or 20 years ago, the capacity to do that, maybe it existed, but people weren't doing it. But now the clients are doing it, And so the lawyers and the firms have to be looking at those things to be aware of it. And even more specific on a case level is being able to effectively evaluate individual cases. And so, let's say a bodily injury case, a car wreck, I need to know what the venue is and whether it's a conservative venue or a liberal one, whether we expect high verdicts or low verdicts. What are the judges like in that county? And what about the particular judge that we have? What about the particular injuries the person is claiming? And so you evaluate all those things, and then you come up with a range and say, okay, based on all the information we have, we think the case is probably worth in this range to settle it, and in this range is a potential verdict. And so, you talk with the client, you evaluate all those things, see what you can do with it, and what's the outcome they want to achieve. And so I like to have a really collaborative relationship where we talk about all those things and have really open lines of communication. But I also need to know, am I evaluating it correctly? And so one of the things I like to do is keep track of what are my evaluations, and then did the case settle within that range that I had projected? Or if we tried it, was the verdict within the range that I had projected? So you can keep up with stuff like that. So if you have individual clients, like if you're representing small businesses or individuals, and if you're a personal injury lawyer, then what your client wants is going to be different than what my big corporate client wants. But the most important thing is, regardless of the nature of the client, is communicating and establishing the expectations for the relationship up front. Because if you, the lawyer, aren't establishing what that relationship is going to look like, how communication is going to be done, the parameters for when you're available and not available, if you aren't setting those expectations, then the client is going to set their own expectation, and it's going to be what's convenient for them, because that's what we all treasure above anything else, is our own self-interest. And so they are going to assume that your availability is what suits them, or your means of communication is what suits them. So if you aren't communicating up front what you need out of that relationship and how it needs to be handled, they are going to do it, and it's not going to work for you, and it's going to come contentious, and it's not going to be an effective relationship that can be successful over the long term.
I'm drawing a blank on what I wanted to say, but
well, I think we can come back to what you said about the nature of your client relationships, how it's changing. And the biggest thing is being adaptable. Things are going to change 10 years from now from what my clients want from me now, and how we're all doing the business side of this from what they are now and from what they were 10 years ago. And so for me to be successful, I need to be constantly evolving, or at minimum being willing to evolve and adapt, so that as the landscape shifts, I can change with it and don't become extinct. And so I have to know what I want from my clients. I have to know what they want from me. And then I have to be able to implement whatever measures I need to accomplish that. And so that requires being malleable and adaptable, so that I can continue to meet their needs for years to come, and they don't go find somebody else who is younger or more flexible or whatever.
I'm not going to find anybody younger than you. Come on, man. But I really appreciate what you're saying about your clients' expectations, and that's something that I deal with, right? Like, marketing is knowing your audience and knowing your target market and knowing what they want, and then I take that information and I use that to inform decisions, whether it be about business development or about sales or about changes I want to make to my website. And speaking of that, this brings me to a really good point. Is I know that you and your company recently put out this legal marketing ebook, and you said that lawyers should make their websites more about their client and make it clear what they can do for their client. And one of the greatest things I learned in my life is somebody told me that you teach people how to treat you, right? And if I can make it clear to my clients what I can provide for them, I make their objective decisions about me really easy, right? They don't have to say, well, I don't know if they're going to do this, or I don't know if they're able to do that. I can make it really, really simple for a client to say, hey, I'm interested. You said you guys do this. That's something that I'm really looking for. And on the same token, I can teach them that, my support team is able to do this, 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 and this. You should speak to this person about that. You should speak to this person about that. I can make things really clear and communicate, and I can teach my clients, how to sort of get the best out of me, but I also don't drive myself crazy in the process. I'm not up at 4 a.m. answering phone calls because they know that they can send me an email for something. If it's more urgent, you can call us. I won't say anything. But I'm putting a relevant example out there. Like, lawyers have to sort of set their clients' expectations of them by teaching them how to treat them. So I want to talk about what a client-centric website should look like, what kind of features should it have, and ultimately, how do you get to the end goal of creating a website for your client?
And I think this is going to depend a lot on what kind of practice area you have. So a personal injury lawyer is going to have a very different goal with his website than what I have, because I think most of those guys really depend on their websites to draw a lot of traffic, to have the right keywords and all the things you need to do so that you rank high on Google. And like, when people are looking, they find you and not somebody else. Whereas our clients is a little bit different. I'm not depending on my website, the firm website, to bring in a bunch of traffic. But what I do want from it is that when clients or potential clients go look at it, they can look and see that I understand what your problems are, and I'm capable of handling those for you. Because a lot of law firm websites, when you go to them and when you click on an attorney's bio page, it says, and we've already talked about the sense of self-importance that so many lawyers have, but what it says is, look at these schools that I went to and these degrees that I have, and my GPA was really awesome, and I did all these things in law school. And that doesn't tell the client anything. Like, that's not helpful. That doesn't tell them that you have identified their problem and what they need and that you're capable of resolving it. And so I think that a good profile page would say, like, here's what it's like to work for me. Here's what you can expect from me during the course of our relationship and how I want us to work together and resolve your problem. And here are the types of practices that I have, and these are the areas that I have expertise. And maybe it directs it to another page where you talk more specifically about those things. But it just gives the client a sense of understanding of like who you are and what it's like, and they can decide, do I like you well enough to contact you or reach out to you? And it also establishes a level of trust, because one of the things that you can do, one of the reasons that I started my law blog, is to establish my expertise in a public space. And so that when they look me up and they see, here are all the topics that I've written about that are relevant to the problems they're experiencing, they can know before they ever contact me that I am at minimum competent to talk about those things. And that I have an expertise in that area, because when people see that you've written about it, they automatically assume that you have expertise, unless it's, like clearly facially wrong. But before they ever contact me, they have an opportunity to learn about who I am. And I have a podcast in addition to the books that if people go listen to it, like, my personality will come out in that, and they can decide, like, okay, that's somebody I like or don't like, as it happens, with it, whichever it is. He's talking about things that matter to me. And so I think that I can trust him with my business. And so, like, that's the whole thing. That's what a website needs to do. is establish some personality and expertise and your ability to identify and resolve their problems to give them confidence to call you. Because if you don't do those things, they're going to go to somebody else.
Truer words have not been spoken today. So I know we're kind of running out of time here. I don't want to keep you too long. Just give me a brief. Why would lawyers be wise to grab a copy of your new book?
What my book provides is a really in-depth assessment of here are very particular things that you can do to help yourself mentally be in a place to be successful. And also, it's not just about mindset, although I think that's hugely important. It's a big part of the book. But I also provide information about setting goals, about having a vision for your practice, implementing metrics and KPIs to help you monitor that. And we talk about client relationships in the book. And so I think that a lot of the information is not like transcendent, but it's things that are really practical. And that's what all my writing that I want to be is practical things that you can implement after reading it, something that you can do to go make your business or your practice more effective today than it was yesterday.
Love it. Jeremy, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. Everybody watching, below is going to be a bunch of links on where you can get the book, on Jeremy's podcast, on his website. Subscribe, like, follow, wherever that stuff goes. I'm not that guy. But Jeremy, seriously, thank you for being on the podcast. Really appreciate you having you here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.